Ethan's world was spinning. The cold metal of the chains dug into his wrists as the kidnappers shouted demands at him. His breath was shallow, not from fear, but from the overwhelming bitterness that had consumed him. He had been so sure. So utterly sure that Emilia, the woman he had devoted his life to, was the one who had saved him during that fateful moment years ago. But her panicked cries and the horrified look in her eyes as the kidnappers taunted her told a different story. "Stop this charade, Ethan," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I know you hired them to prove some twisted point. Stop it before someone gets hurt." He could barely muster the energy to shake his head. The betrayal stung deeper than any wound. She didn't believe him. She never had. One of the kidnappers stepped closer, his knife gleaming. "Your time's up, buddy. Say your prayers." As the blade pierced his chest, memories flooded Ethan's mind. The picture. The girl with the fiery eyes and the kind smile. The one who had shielded him, bruised and battered, years ago. His investigation. The truth he had uncovered too late. Lily. Emilia's twin sister. It wasn't Emilia who had saved him that day, it had been Lily. The sister everyone in the family had cast out. The one he had overlooked, forgotten, and discarded while he poured everything he had into Emilia, believing her to be the one. As the world darkened, Ethan's last thought was of Lily. The fierce, rebellious girl who had risked everything for him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, as his heart gave its final beat. Ethan jolted awake, gasping for air. He clutched his chest, expecting the searing pain of the knife wound, but found only smooth skin beneath his trembling hands. The room was familiar. Too familiar. He looked around, panic surging through him. Posters of his favorite band from high school adorned the walls. His desk was cluttered with textbooks and notes, the ones he had barely glanced at in his teenage years. He stumbled to the mirror. A young face stared back at him, his 17-year-old self. "What?" he whispered, the reality of the situation hitting him like a freight train. Memories of his past life came rushing back. The years he wasted simping for Emilia. The fortune he had squandered. The bitterness he carried to his grave. And Lily. This time, things would be different. He clenched his fists, determination blazing in his eyes. He remembered the details from his investigation. Lily had been kicked out of her family by this time, falsely accused of being a troublemaker when all she had done was defend some kids from bullies. Ethan would find her. He would give her the life she deserved. But first, he needed to prepare. He sat down at his desk, pulling out a notebook. If his knowledge of the future was accurate, he had a golden opportunity to climb the social ladder and build a fortune. Stocks, real estate, innovations. He would use every bit of information he had to secure his path. This time, he vowed, "I won't waste my life on someone who never cared. I'll devote everything to Lily. And I'll make her the happiest woman in the world." As he flipped through the pages, sketching out investment plans and strategies, one thought kept him going. Lily had saved him once. Now it was his turn to save her. Ethan sat at his desk, his once carefree teenage self replaced by a sharp and determined mind. Gone was the boy who had wasted hours daydreaming about Emilia's approval. This time, he would focus on what truly mattered, his studies, his future, and finding Lily. He opened his school books, flipping through pages he hadn't glanced at seriously in his first life. To his surprise, the information came flooding back as though etched into his brain. He had studied these books before, and now, it felt effortless to recall the details. Physics equations, historical dates, and mathematical formulas all fell into place with uncanny precision. This is going to be easier than I thought," he muttered, a faint smile playing on his lips. But Ethan knew that excelling in school wasn't enough. If he was going to secure Lily's happiness, he needed wealth, real wealth. Emilia's family was wealthy, but Ethan's goal wasn't to match them, it was to surpass them. While reviewing his notes, a thought struck him like lightning: penny stocks. Ethan had always been fascinated by investments, and in his previous life, he had spent countless hours researching the meteoric rise of several companies that started as small, undervalued stocks. A quick online search confirmed his suspicions: some of these future giants were currently trading for mere cents. This is gold," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with opportunity. Yet there was a problem: he didn't have enough money to buy significant shares. He needed capital. That's when another realization hit him: cryptocurrency. Ethan had been fascinated by crypto in his past life, obsessing over charts and reading about every major spike and crash. He knew exactly when some of the most popular coins would experience exponential growth. Checking the prices now, he couldn't help but grin. "Crypto is at rock bottom," he muttered, feeling a rush of excitement. "It'll never be this low again." Without wasting time, Ethan approached a local loan shark and borrowed $100,000. The interest rate was brutal, but he didn't care. He wasn't planning on holding the debt for long. Using the money, he purchased several cryptocurrencies, spreading his investment across coins he knew would skyrocket. Over the next few days, his gamble paid off. The market surged, and crypto spiked tenfold, just as he had predicted. Ethan cashed out, repaid the loan in full, and was left with a jaw-dropping $900,000. "One step closer," he murmured, his hands shaking with exhilaration. With his newfound fortune, Ethan turned to the penny stocks he had identified. Carefully, he invested in the companies he knew would grow into giants over the next few years. He didn't overinvest, keeping his stakes under 2% to avoid drawing attention. "This alone will make me a billionaire in 2 years, he said, leaning back in his chair. But Ethan wasn't done yet. He remembered a major scandal from his past life, one that would soon tank the reputation of a prominent company. Using his remaining funds, he shorted their stock, leveraging his position for maximum profit. When the scandal broke, the company's stock plummeted. Ethan sold his position at the perfect time, earning an additional $300,000. Now, he had over $1.2 million in liquid assets, and his investments were already set to grow exponentially. He was no longer the clueless boy chasing after Amelia's approval. He was a man with a plan, one step closer to finding Lily and giving her the life she deserved. Sitting back at his desk, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The future was finally his to shape. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "For Lily. I'll do whatever it takes." Ethan's journey into wealth was nothing short of miraculous. With each passing month, his calculated risks bore fruit, and his fortune grew at an astonishing pace. He meticulously tracked his investments, using his knowledge of the future to navigate the volatile market with precision. Then came the first major breakthrough. One of the penny stocks he had purchased for $50,000 suddenly exploded in value. News spread like wildfire: the company was being acquired by an international giant. Shares skyrocketed overnight, and eager buyers scrambled to get their hands on his modest 2% stake. When the dust settled, Ethan had sold his shares for more than $20 million. This one wasn't a long-term play anyway, he mused, satisfied with his decision. He had foreseen the company's acquisition and knew it wouldn't sustain its growth long-term. Still, the payoff was beyond his wildest expectations. With this windfall, Ethan had the capital he needed to execute his broader plan. He poured his newfound wealth into the future giants he knew would dominate the market within a decade. Every dollar was allocated with care, spreading his investments across industries: tech, renewable energy, pharmaceuticals, and even entertainment. By the time he finished, Ethan had only $1 million left in liquid cash, a safety net to sustain him until his investments matured. "If my calculations are right," he murmured, staring at his investment tracker, "I'll reach $100 billion in 2 years. Enough wealth and influence to change everything. For now, though, his immediate goal was to finish high school. While most of his peers were worrying about grades and college applications, Ethan was already a multimillionaire with a growing empire. Still, he knew that money wasn't his ultimate goal. Every late-night study session, every calculated risk, every dollar he earned was for her. Lily. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as thoughts of her filled his mind. Where was she now? The fiery girl who had risked everything to protect him. His heart ached at the memory of how she had been cast out by her family, left to fend for herself. Wait for me, Lily, he whispered. Just a little longer. I'll find you. And when I do, I'll make sure you're the happiest woman in the world. Ethan clenched his fists, determination surging through him. He was building not just wealth, but power and influence, tools he would use to find her, protect her, and give her the life she deserved. As the days passed, Ethan's reputation began to grow. Though he kept a low profile, whispers of his financial prowess spread among the elite. By the time he graduated high school, he would already be a multimillionaire with enough influence to move mountains. But for now, he waited patiently, every step bringing him closer to his ultimate goal. Lily was out there somewhere, and Ethan vowed to find her. Wherever you are, he thought, his resolve unshakable, wait for me. I'm coming for you. The day of the final results arrived with an air of excitement and nervous energy. Students gathered in the school auditorium, chatting and speculating about their scores. Among them was Amelia, her usual confidence dimmed by the passage of time. She glanced across the room, her eyes landing on Ethan. He stood tall, exuding an aura of quiet confidence she hadn't noticed before. His once boyish charm had transformed into something striking, handsome, composed, and utterly unbothered. For months, she had watched him change. The boy who used to dote on her, chasing her every word and gesture, was now indifferent. He no longer looked at her with those adoring eyes. Instead, he focused on his studies and his goals, leaving Amelia puzzled and intrigued. When the results were announced, Ethan's name was at the top of the list. A wave of applause filled the room, but Ethan barely acknowledged it. His mind was elsewhere, calculating his next move. As the crowd dispersed, Amelia took a deep breath, swallowing her pride. She approached Ethan, rehearsing her words in her mind. Ethan, she called softly, stopping him in his tracks. He turned to face her, his expression neutral but polite. Yes. For the first time in years, Amelia felt nervous. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to speak. I've been thinking, she began, her voice faltering. I was wrong about you. You're different now. More mature, confident. I can see it. Ethan raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. I mean, if your offer still stands, she said, her cheeks reddening, I'd like to give us a chance. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Ethan chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. It wasn't mocking, but it was clear he found her words amusing. Amelia, he said, his voice calm but firm, there was a time when I would have given anything to hear you say that. But that time has passed. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Ethan's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. I wasted too much of my life chasing after you, thinking you were someone you're not. But I've realized something important: you were never the one for me. The words hit Amelia like a blow. But, why? I'm here now. Isn't this what you wanted? Ethan shook his head. It's what I thought I wanted. But the truth is, I was blind. I spent years trying to win over someone who didn't care about me, while the person who truly mattered, she was right in front of me, and I didn't even realize it. Amelia stared at him, stunned into silence. I'm done living in the past, Ethan continued. I'm moving forward. There's someone out there who deserves my devotion, someone I failed in my last life. This time, I won't make the same mistake. With that, he walked away, leaving Emilia standing there, her pride shattered and her heart heavy with regret. As Ethan stepped out of the auditorium, he felt a sense of closure. Emilia was nothing more than a chapter in his life, a chapter he had finally finished. Now, his focus was clear. Lily. He had spent weeks piecing together every detail he could remember from his past life, every clue about where she might be. It was time to begin the search. Wherever you are, he thought, determination surging through him, I'll find you. And this time, I'll make sure you're the happiest person in the world. Ethan clenched his fists, a smile tugging at his lips. The real journey was about to begin. Lily's day began like every other, filled with struggle, sacrifice, and solitude. She walked briskly through the busy streets, her thin jacket barely holding off the morning chill. In her hands was a small sandwich, the only thing she could afford for lunch after saving most of her meager earnings for rent and necessities. As she turned a corner, her eyes fell on a young boy sitting on the curb. His clothes were tattered, his face pale, and his eyes hollow with hunger. Lily's heart twisted painfully at the sight. Without hesitation, she crouched down, her voice soft and kind. Hey, are you hungry? The boy looked at her with wide, desperate eyes but said nothing. Wordlessly, Lily placed the sandwich in his hands. There you go, she said with a gentle smile. The boy didn't need to be told twice. He tore into the sandwich like a starving animal, and Lily watched, her stomach protesting loudly at the loss of her only meal. It's nothing, she whispered to herself. Just one more hungry lunch. I'll manage. Lily stood and adjusted her scarf. She couldn't dwell on her empty stomach, she had to get to her second job. With her family's disdain hanging over her like a dark cloud, she had no choice but to work tirelessly to survive. Her family had labeled her a delinquent, a shame to their name. The scar on her face, a souvenir from a fight she had gotten into while protecting a child from bullies, had been the final nail in the coffin. To them, it wasn't a mark of bravery but a blemish that ruined her worth as a potential bride. No wealthy family would marry an unruly, scarred girl. Her family's disdain was so great that they had kicked her out, forcing her to abandon her education and fend for herself. Now, as she dragged her tired body to her tiny rented apartment after a grueling double shift, she was greeted by her landlord's scowling face blocking the entrance. Lily, he snapped, you're 3 months behind on rent. I've been more than patient, but this is the end of the line. You're out. Lily's shoulders slumped, the weight of the day crashing down on her. I just need a little more time. I'll get the money, I promise. The landlord shook his head. No more excuses. Pack your things and leave. With a heavy heart, Lily nodded. She didn't argue, there was no point. She had no money, no support, no place to go. As night fell, Lily wandered the streets with a small bag of her belongings. She tried to ignore the stares of passers-by, the pity in their eyes only deepening her sense of isolation. When she heard a commotion in an alleyway, her instincts kicked in. A group of thugs had cornered a young girl, their cruel laughter echoing off the walls. Hey! Lily shouted, stepping forward despite her exhaustion. Leave her alone. The thugs turned, sneering at the sight of the slender woman before them. But Lily didn't back down. She fought with everything she had, her body fueled by nothing but sheer determination to protect the innocent. By the time the thugs fled, Lily was bruised and battered. The girl she had saved ran off without a word of thanks, but Lily didn't mind. Dragging herself to a nearby bench, she collapsed with a weary sigh. The stars above blurred as tears filled her eyes. Just one true friend, she whispered to the night. Is that too much to ask for? She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold biting through her thin clothes. With no home, no family, and no one to lean on, Lily closed her eyes and surrendered to sleep on the bench, exposed to the harshness of the world once again. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but for now, she rested, her fragile hope flickering like a dying ember. Ethan had finally found her. It had taken months of leveraging his growing influence, combing through every lead, and retracing every step of her isolated life. Now, as he stood before the battered and bruised figure of Lily, his heart clenched painfully. She was curled up on a park bench, her frame thin and frail, her clothes tattered and barely suitable for the cold night. Her once radiant presence was now replaced by exhaustion and despair, her scarred face bearing silent stories of her struggles. Ethan didn't hesitate. Bending down, he scooped her up into his arms in a princess carry, her body light as a feather. The motion jolted her awake. Her bleary eyes fluttered open, and the first thing she saw was Ethan's determined expression. Lily's heart sank. Was this another one of those desperate men, someone willing to take advantage of a weak woman who had nothing left? Her voice was hoarse and laced with sarcasm as she croaked, "Man, how desperate must you be to go after someone like me?" Ethan froze, his gaze softening at her words. He could see the fear and bitterness in her eyes, but he also noticed something else: resignation. She didn't even have the strength to fight back, her fever burning bright as her body barely clung to consciousness. "It's okay," Ethan said gently, his voice steady. "You're safe now." She didn't believe him. Why should she? In her experience, kindness was a luxury she could no longer afford to trust. As Ethan carried her to his car, Lily's mind spiraled with dread. Was he planning to sell her? Was her scarred face no longer enough to deter someone as desperate as this man? Her stomach twisted with fear and helplessness. But when Ethan carefully placed her in the back seat of a luxurious car and wrapped a warm blanket around her, her fear turned to confusion. He climbed in after her, his voice calm and resolute. "Don't worry, we're going to the hospital." Lily's fevered mind latched onto his words, misinterpreting them entirely. Her thoughts turned dark. The hospital? Is that code for harvesting my organs? She swallowed hard, her body trembling under the blanket. Goodbye, cruel world. Yet, as the car sped through the city streets, Ethan's actions began to chip away at her defenses. He didn't make a single inappropriate move. Instead, he kept his distance, his gaze flickering to her with nothing but concern. When they arrived at the hospital, Ethan effortlessly carried her inside, ignoring the curious stares of onlookers. Doctors and nurses quickly gathered, their professionalism taking over as they guided Lily onto a stretcher and began their assessments. The gentle care she received left her bewildered. The warm blankets, the foredrip, the soothing words of the staff, all of it felt foreign, unreal. She glanced at Ethan, who stood by her side, his expression unwavering. "Why?" she finally rasped, her voice barely audible. Ethan leaned closer, his tone firm yet tender. "Because you deserve better, Lily. You deserve someone who will protect you, care for you, and give you the life you've been denied. I won't let you suffer anymore." Lily's mind raced, her emotions a tangled mess of gratitude, suspicion, and vulnerability. She wanted to respond, to push him away or pull him closer, but her body betrayed her. Exhaustion and the fever took over, and she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. Ethan stayed by her side, watching as the color slowly returned to her face. His resolve only grew stronger. This was just the beginning. Lily had suffered enough, and he would do whatever it took to ensure she never had to suffer again. Lily woke up to the soft rustle of fabric and the faint scent of lavender. Blinking her eyes open, she was greeted by the sight of a luxurious room adorned with warm tones and elegant furnishings. The bed she lay on was unlike anything she'd ever experienced: soft, inviting, and utterly foreign to her world of hardship. Her first thought was one of disbelief. Is this a dream? Did I die and wake up in some kind of rich man's fantasy? The sound of light footsteps drew her attention to a maid entering the room. Dressed in pristine attire, the woman smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Lily. How are you feeling?" Lily stared at her, speechless. Before she could even respond, two more maids entered, each carrying trays laden with food and medicine. They set them down with practiced ease, as though they'd done this 1,000 times before. Where am I?" Lily finally managed, her voice hoarse. "You're in Mr. Ethan's mansion," one of the maids explained, her tone polite yet friendly. "He brought you here last night and instructed us to take care of you. Please don't worry about anything. You're safe here." Lily's mind spun, the words barely registering. Her first instinct was suspicion. Why would someone like him go out of his way for someone like me? But then a flicker of hope sparked, an absurd hope born from countless urban novels she'd read. Could this be one of those stories? She mused. Maybe he's a heartbroken CEO whose girlfriend cheated on him, and now he's marrying the first woman he sees to spite her. Maybe he'll burst in here with a prenup and marriage forms, demanding I become his wife. The thought made her chuckle bitterly. Glancing at her reflection in a nearby mirror, her laughter died. Her scarred face stared back at her, a harsh reminder of her reality. No, that's not possible. I'm not the flawless beauty these stories demand. There's no way I'd catch the attention of someone this rich. Still, confusion gnawed at her. If not for her looks, then why had Ethan brought her here? She didn't remember him, and he was far wealthier than even her parents had been. What could he possibly want from her? Before she could delve further into her thoughts, the door opened, and Ethan entered. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his presence commanding yet kind. His eyes softened when they met hers, and he approached with measured steps. "How are you feeling, Lily?" he asked, his voice gentle. She stiffened, unsure how to respond. I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Ethan pulled up a chair and sat beside her, his gaze steady. "Because I owe you everything. You may not remember me, but you saved my life once. And now, I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure you never have to suffer again." Lily's heart skipped a beat. His words felt sincere, but they only deepened her confusion. Saved him? When? How? "You don't have to worry about anything anymore," Ethan continued. "This house, these people, they're here for you. You'll never have to fight alone again." Lily stared at him, her emotions a chaotic storm. She didn't know whether to believe him or to keep her guard up. One thing was certain, her life had just taken a turn she couldn't have predicted, and for the first time in years, she dared to hope.